What's up guys, Alec on Kiri here. I recently had a subscriber ask me to go to the prom with them, and while I was extremely flattered, I had to decline because frankly, I'm way too old to be going to the prom. It wasn't until later that I realized they were actually asking me about my take on progressive range of motion training for the deadlift. If I think this is a viable training method, and if so, how would I go about implementing it? So, after the embarrassment wore off, I decided to make this video. It just so happens that as far as deadlift training goes, not only do I think this method can work exceptionally well for advanced athletes looking to break through a plateau, but I also have experience with using it myself. In the summer of 2014, my personal best deadlift was an incredibly rough, barely locked it out, 575-pound sumo pull. But my progress had been stalled for about a year. So I decided to run a deadlift specialization cycle based around progressive range of motion block pulls. And after about 15 weeks of deadlifting 2 to 3 times a week, I pulled a tough but super smooth personal best deadlift of 585 pounds. And I'm confident that I could have done 600 that day if I had simply loaded it on the bar. So how did I set up my training cycle to allow me to finally make some progress, break the 6-plate barrier, and pull nearly 4 times body weight after an entire year of stagnation and frustration? Well, the first thing to know is, in spite of pulling sumo for my test day, I did all my deadlifting during the specialization cycle conventional style. Most people, myself included, have no reason to bother doing sumo block pulls. And except for a very, very small subset of powerlifters who are specializing in the sumo deadlift and have a very particular weakness, they're simply a waste of time. Most people are going to get much better results doing conventional block pulls. So stick with conventional regardless of your preferred pulling style. This is an advanced technique anyway, so your form should already be dialed in if you're considering this training method. In which case, taking a few months off from sumo pulling isn't going to cause your body to forget everything it knows. Now let's get to the juicy stuff. I set my training cycle up where I was deadlifting 3 times a week for the majority of the program, and then twice a week towards the end of the program. Which sounds like a lot at first, but the key here is that there was only 1 working set of deadlifts at every session. And 2 of the 3 sessions were block pulls, with only 1 session being done from the floor. This is important because the block pulls, especially at higher heights, are far less stressful on the body overall than deadlifting from the floor is. In addition to the deadlifting, I was squatting twice a week with light to moderate weights and doing maybe 1 or 2 other relatively easy lower body assistance exercises to fill in the remaining gaps. So when examined as a whole, I think this program is very feasible. Your body will adapt to the volume and the frequency of pulling as long as you program your numbers correctly. You're honest about your current 1 rep max, and you don't get carried away with the idea of trying to pull too many heavy or slow reps. If I recall correctly, my body responded favorably for a few months before I could feel the cumulative fatigue really start to build. So at that point, I took something like 3 or 4 full weeks off from deadlifting altogether to let the massive amount of fatigue I had accumulated dissipate. And then I tested my sumo deadlift and smashed the personal best. The cycle begins with 2 block pull sessions, 1 at the beginning of the week and 1 at the end of the week, and a regular deadlift session from the floor sandwiched in between. You'll want to be honest about your max and start off with about 80% of your max for the deadlifts from the floor. For the block pulls, however, you'll be starting out with 100% of your max deadlift. And what I'm about to say is going to shock all of you. You'll be starting out pulling these block pulls from above the knee. But Alec, I thought you said you should ditch the rack pull from above the knee. Well, for starters, I recommend pulling off blocks, not off pins, because it changes the movement. It destroys bars also, but it fundamentally changes the movement. Pulling off pins just isn't natural because they cause the bar to pre-flex before you've even applied any tension to it. But anyway, yes, this is the only time I'm going to advocate pulling reps from above the knee. But you're only going to be doing it for a short period of time, and you're only going to be using your 1 rep max deadlift, not some obscene number that's nearly double what you can actually lift. And if you want this to work, you'll do yourself a favor and focus on pulling these reps correctly in a way that's actually going to create transfer, i.e., don't use your fucking quads at all. I mean it. If you lift a weight from the floor, you can't use your quads at this stage in the lift. So don't use them for these block pulls either. Hinge at the hips and let the posterior chain and upper back muscles do their jobs. Now, in order to make this work, you need to finagle about 6 to 8 different heights to pull from for the block pulls. This is going to take some thought and experimentation. Personally, I have 2 sets of homemade blocks. One set is 13 inches high and the other set is 7 inches high. So I simply use 2x12 planks, which are actually only 1.5 inches thick, to adjust the height as I want to increase the range of motion. So for example, based on my personal anthropometry, I have 8 different heights that I want to pull from for this cycle. And remember, these are block pull heights. So they're indicative of how high the blocks are that the plates are sitting on. So the actual bar that I'm pulling on is a few inches higher. My block pull heights are 11.5 inches, which is just at my VMO, 10 inches, which is just above the kneecap, 8.5 inches, which is directly in line with the kneecap, 7 inches, which is just below the knee, 5.5 inches, 4 inches, 2.5 inches, and 1 inch. So for week 1, I rest the bar on my 13-inch blocks and I stand on 1 plank so that the bar is elevated 11.5 inches. To graduate to the next range of motion, I stand on 2 planks, which leaves the bar elevated 10 inches. Standing on 3 planks leaves the bar elevated only 8.5 inches. Then at this point, I switch to the shorter 7-inch blocks and continue on in the same fashion. Just remember, these are pulling heights. Your body is going to be different than mine, and so your pulling heights will be different as well. But as a basic rule of thumb, you want to start from a couple inches over the knee, drop to just barely above the knee, then directly in line with the knee, then an inch or 2 below the knee, and so on and so forth, until you're just an inch or 2 off the floor. Now for the first couple weeks, you're going to increase the range of motion every single week. You'll do 1 working set using your 1 rep max deadlift from the floor twice a week off the blocks. Once at the beginning of the week and once at the end of the week. You'll warm up to the working weight and then you'll do as many good, clean reps as possible. When you're working above the knee, you might get as many as 20 or more solid reps. But the key here is that we never increase the weight on the block pulls for the duration of the cycle. And we progress instead by increasing the range of motion. And as we do so, the number of reps you're capable of getting will inevitably decrease. Once you get to the kneecap, you'll probably want to spend 2 weeks at each height before you make another increase in range of motion. And once you get as low as mid-shin, depending on how you're recovering, you'll also want to consider dropping the session in the middle of the week and just deadlifting twice a week at this point instead. This will likely become necessary at some point because as you move deeper and deeper into the cycle, not only will your deadlifts from the floor be getting heavier, but also the lower you get on the blocks, the more stress those pulls are going to be causing as well. And at some point, it will become too much for your body to handle unless you drop one of the sessions. Now, as for the deadlifts from the floor, I recommend starting out with about 80% of your max and doing 1 tough but not quite all-out working set once a week, and then simply running a linear progression by adding 5 to 10 pounds to the bar every week or every other week. The way I did this was, I simply set the goal of conventional deadlifting 500 pounds, which was my approximate conventional 1 rep max at the time, for a set of 5 reps from the floor as my goal set. When I did that, I planned to switch back to the sumo deadlift and test my 1 rep max there. So this meant that all my block pulls for the duration of the cycle were to be done with 500 pounds. And it meant that I needed to start off with 400 pounds from the floor. To give you a better idea of how to put it all together, I'm going to show you a sample of my entire training cycle. Now, as a 500-pound conventional deadlifter at the time, I ran pretty much this exact same training cycle with these exact same goal rep ranges, and I capped off the cycle by pulling 500 pounds for a set of 5 conventional before testing my sumo deadlift a few weeks later. Check it out. Anyway, I think I made this whole thing sound more convoluted than it really is. But, you know, that's kind of my MO, so oh well, you guys are used to it. Load up a bar, put it on some blocks, lift it a few times, and over a period of a few months, gradually lower the height of the blocks. Do some pulls from the floor concurrently. Boom, progressive range of motion training. As a pro tip, in my experience, it works best for the deadlift. I'm not saying it can't work for other lifts, but exercises like the squat or the bench press or the overhead press, etc., will have a true negative. And performing these exercises off of pins and without going through the same full eccentric cycle just isn't the same. And so the carryover seems to be lackluster. Since the deadlift lacks a true negative phase, it seems to be able to bypass this problem, and phenomenal results can be achieved by training it this way. Anyway, that's all I got for now, guys. Please be sure to like the video, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and definitely leave me some love in the comments down below. If you do decide to give this cycle a try, as I recommended setting it up here, please let me know how it goes for you. I'd love to hear what your results were, good or bad. Other than that, if you're interested in my online coaching services, shoot me an email at ankiri.elite@gmail.com, and I would be happy to pass some more information your way. And that wraps it up. Keep training hard, and I will catch you guys next time.